Welcome to BeFM Drama, where we're continuing our 5-part adaptation of The Adventure of the Engineer's Thumb, a classic Sherlock Holmes mystery by Arthur Conan Doyle. A terrified young hydraulic engineer arrives at Dr. Watson's medical office with a horrible injury and a fascinating story to tell. Join us today as we continue to explore the story of Victor Hatherley, who has just been offered an odd but lucrative job by the secretive and suspicious Colonel Lysander Stark. He's now on a midnight journey to a village in Berkshire to examine a malfunctioning hydraulic press apparently used for the compression of valuable fuller's earth. But Hatherley can't shake his unease, and we know that come the morning, he'll be in Dr. Watson's office, missing his left thumb. Join me, Joshua Cornwell, the host of BeFM Drama, as I narrate this tale in the role of Dr. Watson. Hatherley found himself astonished at the sudden commission that had been dropped into his lap. On the one hand, he was quite happy, as the pay was nearly double what he'd made in 2 years of desultory private practice. On the other hand, the face and manner of Colonel Stark had made an unpleasant impression upon him, and he was uncertain that the man's explanation of the fuller's earth on his property was sufficient justification for making him arrive in Eyford in the middle of the night, to say nothing about the Colonel's extreme anxiety over privacy. In the end, however, Hatherley threw his fears to the winds, ate a hearty dinner, drove to Paddington Station, and started off, having obeyed the Colonel's instruction to tell nobody of his business or where he was traveling. At Reading, he had to change not only his carriage, but his station, and was just in time for the last train to Eyford. He reached the dim little station just after 11 o'clock. He was the only passenger who exited there, and there was no one else on the platform except a single sleepy porter with a lantern. As Hatherley passed through the main gate, he found Colonel Stark waiting in the shadows on the other side. Without a word, he grasped Hatherley's arm and hurried him into a carriage through its already open door. The moment they were inside, the Colonel closed the window shutters and tapped the woodwork to signal the driver. Within an instant, they were off as fast as a horse could gallop. At this moment, Holmes, who'd been listening intently to Hatherley's story, leaned forward and interjected with a question.
One horse?
Yes, only one.
Did you notice its color?
Yes, I saw it by the side lights when I was stepping into the carriage. It was chestnut.
Tired or looking fresh?
Oh, fresh and glossy.
Thank you. I'm sorry to have interrupted. Please carry on with your very interesting statement.
Hatherley and the Colonel sat side by side in silence as the carriage drove on for over an hour. Hatherley remembered that Lysander Stark had told him the house was only 7 miles from the station, but given the time it took and the speed they traveled, he estimated it must have been closer to 12. Hatherley was uncomfortably aware of the fact that the Colonel was staring at him with great intensity for the entire length of the journey. The country roads were rough, and the carriage lurched and jolted constantly. When the engineer tried to look out the windows, he found they were made of frosted glass. He could see nothing but the occasional blur of passing lights. Several times he tried to start some conversation, but the Colonel only gave single-word answers to his questions, and he soon gave up. At last, the bumping of the road changed to the crisp smoothness of a gravel drive, and the carriage came to a stop. Colonel Lysander Stark jumped out, and Hatherley followed after him. They walked swiftly onto a porch and inside a house. For Hatherley, it was like stepping directly from the carriage into the entrance hall, and he failed to catch the briefest look at the exterior of the building. The moment the two men stepped inside, the doors slammed shut behind them, and Hatherley heard the faint rattle of wheels as the carriage drove away. It was pitch dark in the house, and the Colonel was fumbling about for matches when suddenly a door opened at the other end of the passage, and a light shot out in their direction. It grew brighter, and a woman appeared with a lamp held above her head, pushing her face forward to peer at the men through the darkness. Hatherley could see that she was pretty, and from the way the light shone upon the dark dress she was wearing, he knew it was made from expensive material. She spoke a few words in a questioning tone, and the colonel answered so gruffly that she flinched and the lamp nearly fell from her hand. Stark walked up to her, whispered something in her ear, took the lamp, and pushed her back into the room from which she'd come. Then walked back to Hatherley with the lamp in his hand and led the engineer to another door.
Perhaps you'll have the kindness to wait in this room for a few minutes. I shall not keep you waiting an instant.
The colonel disappeared back into the darkness, leaving the somewhat unsettled engineer in a quiet, plainly furnished room with a round table in the center covered with books. He glanced at some of them and saw that 2 were scientific manuals and the others volumes of poetry. Hatherley walked over to the window, hoping to look outside, but found it blocked with heavy shutters. It was a wonderfully silent house. He could hear an old clock ticking loudly somewhere, but otherwise everything was dead still. His feeling of uneasiness continued to grow. Who were these odd people, and what were they doing in this strange, out-of-the-way place? And where was the place? He knew it was 10 miles or so from Eyford, but was it north, south, east, or west? He had no idea. Reading and other large towns were within that radius, so the place might not be as secluded as it felt. But Hatherley felt certain, from the absolute silence, that they were in the countryside. He started to pace up and down in the room, humming a tune under his breath to keep his nervousness under control, feeling that he was thoroughly earning his £50 fee. Suddenly, without any warning sound from the utter stillness, the door of his room swung slowly open. The woman stood in the doorway, the darkness of the hall behind her, the yellow light in the room illuminating her eager and beautiful face. Hatherley saw at once that she was sick with fear, and the sight sent a chill down his spine. She held up a shaking finger to warn him to be silent, and whispered at him in hushed syllables, glancing back from time to time like a frightened horse into the darkness behind her.
I would go. I would not stay here. There is no good for you here.
But, madam, I have not yet done what I came for. I cannot possibly leave until I have seen the machine.
It's not worth your while to wait. You can pass through the door. No one hinders. For the love of heaven, get away from here before it's too late.
But Hatherley was somewhat headstrong by nature, and all the more ready to engage in an affair when there was some obstacle in the way. He thought of his £50 fee, of his wearisome journey, and of the unpleasant night which seemed to lie before him. Was it all for nothing? Why should he slink away without having carried out his work, and without the payment which was his due? This woman might, for all he knew, be a maniac. With a firm expression, despite feeling more shaken by her words than he would like to admit, Hatherley shook his head.
I'm sorry, ma'am, but I must remain here and complete the work I have agreed to.
The woman was about to say something more when a door slammed down the hall and the sound of approaching footsteps were heard. She listened for a moment, then threw up her arms in despair and vanished as suddenly and noiselessly as she had come. The newcomers were Colonel Lysander Stark and a short, fat man with a double chin.
This is my secretary and manager, Mr. Ferguson. By the way, I was under the impression that I'd left the door to this room shut. Why is it open? I fear that you might feel a draft.
On the contrary, I opened the door myself. I felt the room was a little stuffy.
The colonel gave Hatherley a long, suspicious look.
Perhaps we had better get to business then. Mr. Ferguson and I will take you to see the machine.
I'd better put my hat on, I suppose.
Oh no, it is in the house.
What? You dig Fuller's earth in the house?
No, this is only where we compress it. But never mind that. All we wish you to do is to examine the machine and let us know what's wrong with it.
Our sense of unease begins to grow. Hatherley has been given his first desperate warning by a terrified and mysterious woman, and now he must inspect the strange machinery that has brought him to this silent and mysterious house. Join us tomorrow evening as we continue this tale of the engineer's thumb here on our next edition of BeFM Drama.